Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the top stories. The US has frozen aid to almost all nations, including Ukraine, though military aid will be continuing following Joe Biden's previous aid packages. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has signalled he is ready for talks with Trump over the war in Ukraine. 2 military flights from the US carrying migrants have landed in Guatemala. 4 apparently have landed in Mexico, though Mexico has refused a request from President Trump to allow deportation flights to land in the country. Israel has received a list of the next hostages to be released by Hamas as part of the recent ceasefire deal. Elsewhere, Israel will not withdraw troops from Lebanon by Sunday's deadline, as agreed in the ceasefire deal with Hezbollah. The Philippines has suspended a South China Sea survey over what it's called Chinese harassment. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio has clashed with China's foreign minister over Taiwan and the South China Sea in his first call as US Secretary of State. Since taking office, President Donald Trump has announced a flurry of immigration-related policies and executive orders, paving the way for a widespread effort to crack down on undocumented migrants in the states. In more than 21 actions, Trump has vowed to overhaul parts of the US immigration system, including how migrants are processed and deported from the US. 2 US military planes carrying dozens of expelled migrants have arrived in Guatemala without specifying whether they were part of the deportation operation launched by President Donald Trump. A total of 79 Guatemalans, 48 men and 31 women, were on a first flight that landed at around midnight, the Central American country's Migration Institute said. The second, with an unspecified number of migrants on board, also arrived soon after. The White House announced that the largest massive deportation operation in history is well underway. The Guatemalan government, however, did not confirm whether any of those migrants were among the deportees that arrived. Washington also sent 4 deportation flights to Mexico. The White House press secretary said on X the Mexican government has not confirmed either the arrival of flights or any agreement to receive a specific number of planes with deportees. Joining us to discuss this topic, we firstly have Rabinder Sachdev, an international affairs expert, joining us. Rabinder Sachdev, thank you very much for being here. We are looking now at flights leaving the United States. Again, action is happening off the back of Trump's words. What do you think the importance of these flights signifies in terms of Trump's efforts to solve the migration crisis, as he puts it?
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you. I think what it signifies, firstly and foremost, is that Trump has got down cracking, and as he says, promises made, promises kept. So a lot of this is, of course, focused towards his own political base. That said, other than the optics of that, he is definitely, yes, moving ahead with his plans for the deportations that he is, visualizing or sharing as being the largest ever on American soil. He may not only may not, I think everyone is clearly doubting that he would achieve the objectives he wants, like 11 million, 15 million illegals completely rooted out of the United States. That will not happen. That will take ages, some substantial number to happen. But what will happen and what is happening, we are clearly seeing steps along those lines on various fronts. It's on not only deportations, it's also about the birthright citizenship, which he, through executive action, cancelled, but which the judge has put a stay on right now. So legal battles there. So bottom line, there will be lots and lots of legal battles going ahead. However, at the same time, yes, a certain number and could be a good number of illegals would be deported. And I think the lowest hanging fruit would be those who have some, criminal charges or some criminal past, or who are already within the ambit of the US legal system or known to the US authorities, be it in the states, wherever, right? They'll be the ones, firstly, easiest to kind of gather and put together in some camps and then deport. So I think what this shows is that the administration is gearing up. And in implementing its policies regarding immigration and is related to illegals, there will be more and more actions forthcoming. And yes, numbers of immigrants will be deported. Uh, Large numbers or small numbers, but definitely a growing number would be seen in the times ahead.
Yes, also joining us is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, a former diplomat. Ambassador Sachdev, the resulting flights that have happened, of course, require cooperation from both teams. Mexico have allegedly said that they won't accept military flights, though the states are saying that 4 flights have been sent. How important do you think it is that both countries can come to an agreement in order for Trump's plans to be carried out in the way he wants?
I think most countries would have extradition treaties that allows the host country to send or deport the illegals back to their home country. So Mexico might demur at foreign Latin Americans from further south, like Guatemala, Honduras, Venezuela, etc., who have used Mexico as a launching pad to go to US. But as far as Mexico's own citizens are concerned, I think it'll have no reason not to accept them, provided they are bona fide Mexican citizens. I would here also like to have a domestic perspective of United States. Some of the states are ruled by democratic governors. They may have a different view about deportation, and Mr. Trump may have difficulty in getting his way. Secondly, U.S. Employment market is extremely tight, thanks to good growth rate that it has been recording of late. It has probably got the best GDP growth figures in the OECD countries, and the number of job seekers is quite low. So therefore, I think if immigrants are deported in huge numbers, 11 million is the total figure often bandied around, this would take away able-bodied people who would largely do manual work in United States. And that would create a vacuum which would be difficult to fill.
Yeah.
So it may create an unprecedented situation wherein the ground level jobs are in need of foreign workers who would be then legitimately required to come through legal means and work there. So it's a zero-sum game at a certain level. Thank you.
Yes, Rabinder Sachdev, you mentioned the low-hanging fruits of convicted criminals, but moving towards Trump's goals and aims to deport all undocumented migrants, that process is going to require the military, but also legal battles. In terms of those legal battles, we saw one yesterday, but do you think that the continuation of Trump's real aim to get rid of undocumented migrants, do you think that's going to face further legal challenges, not just of the one that we've seen recently with the birthright citizenship?
Oh yes, countless more, lawsuits and challenges would be out there. Right now, the one citizenship challenge which was there was by, I think, attorney generals of some 20 or 22 democratic states, right? So there'll be all kind of players. There'll be democratic attorney generals, there'll be civil advocacy groups, non-profits, and individuals, individual defendants who would be hiring lawyers and pro bono legal services, human rights groups, and even, constitutional groups who do think that much of what is being done is not constitutional, not per the law, let's say. So I do anticipate n number of legal procedures in the courts at all levels in the United States, be it in the state level, state judiciary, and going all the way up to Supreme Court. Some of these cases would definitely reach the Supreme Court also. So going ahead, that is one scenario. And in preparation for this, what the Trump administration is doing is that, within its own departments of the government, various departments, not only the Homeland and Judiciary, be it the Department of State or whichever departments, they are beefing up the in-house legal counsels. And they are ensuring, and Trump is ensuring, that the in-house legal counsels in these agencies are those who are aligned with the vision of Trump. In the past administration, what happened, very often Trump's executive orders were kind of, faced hurdles because the legal departments in-house of various US agencies would say that, no, this order is not quote unquote legal. So Trump is going to ensure that, one, he doesn't face that hurdle inside the government, but it is outside the government that these challenges would come. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt. And not only this, I mean, immigration is one, right? But there are several other topics, including the issue of tariffs and whichever be there, due to which the Trump administration will be fully occupied, but it will prosecute the cases very vigorously. And even if the cases it loses, it will try and come around, it will appeal them, or it will pass some other order sidestepping the main order. It will try every tool in the kit to make sure that the objectives which it has, it is able to achieve, if not fully, partially, to the fullest extent it can prosecute.
Yes, Rabinder Sachdev, thank you very much for your time. Ambassador Sachdev will be staying with us as we discuss the new US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's criticised China's dangerous actions towards the Philippines in the South China Sea. Rubio assured Manila of Washington's ironclad commitment to defending the Philippines in the face of Chinese provocation. During his first call with Philippines Foreign Minister Enrique Manalo, China has repeatedly asserted sovereignty over most of the South China Sea and accused rival claimant states, including the Philippines, Vietnam and Malaysia, of encroachment. Rubio also criticised Beijing's dangerous and destabilising actions in the South China Sea in the call with Manilo. The State Department said in a statement, Secretary Rubio conveyed that China's behaviour undermines regional peace and stability and is inconsistent with international law. Rubio held the call with his Philippine counterparts a day after holding a four-way meeting with his quadrilateral security dialogue counterparts from India, Japan and Australia. Joining us first on this story, we have Ross Feingold, who is a political risk analyst, joining us from Taiwan. We know that Rubio has, of course, spoken with the Philippines. He's also been in discussion with his Chinese counterparts. One of those points being discussed was Taiwan, where, of course, you are. But looking at the overall security in the South China Sea and the region, do you think this is America really putting their stand and making a stand against potential Chinese aggression against nations that they are aligned with?
Obviously, for the Trump administration, they've been in office less than a week. But what people in this region are eagerly awaiting, when I say people, I mean governments, militaries, national security, defense experts, they're waiting to see what kind of presence the U.S. military will have under the Trump administration. What kind of presence will they have, for example, in the South China Sea? That will be one of the key areas that people will be looking to see how robust will the U.S. presence be. Other parts of the Western Pacific also fall within that category. How robust will the U.S. presence be in the East China Sea, in the Sea of Japan? How often will the United States exercise with friendly countries like Japan, Korea, Philippines, and Australia? So there are a lot of unknowns at the moment, but I think if we had to guess, it's a safe guess that there will be a robust U.S. presence in this part of the world.
Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, looking at Trump's comments relating to his allies within the region, do you think this is isolating China away from neighbouring nations?
I think that is the intention. But one would also like to add that Trump has, during the past 1 week, mellowed his criticism of China and has indicated yesterday in a Fox interview for the first time that it may not be necessary to have higher tariffs on Chinese goods. As you would recall, on during election campaign, he talked about 60% tariffs. It was whittled down to 10% during the inauguration and afterwards. And now it has been hinted that he may or may not have such an agenda, and the two countries may be able to sort this out amicably. One of the first calls President himself made was to Chinese President Xi, who called him actually, and they had a long discussion, apparently on the all gamuts of their bilateral ties as well as the South China Sea situation, etc. Now, Mr. Rubio is well known to be a China hawk, and what he has said is not unexpected. But the first call, once again, being with Wang Yi, the Chinese counterpart, also has a message in itself that instead of sort of talking at each other, they're talking to each other. And here, overall, we should remember President's intention not to get into war situations. He has, in his inaugural speech, also said that U.S. will not be sending troops abroad to fight others' wars.
Yes,
So all
apologies
those
to interrupt,
messages-
Ambassador Sachdev. I just want to pick up on that while we've got Ross here from Taiwan. Obviously, war is a potential. China have promised to reunify with Taiwan. And Trump, in the last 24 hours, has said that he is going to freeze aid to countries other than Israel and Egypt. What impact will that have on Taiwan if they had to defend themselves against China?
Biden has issued approval for U.S. weapons, military equipment to be gifted to Taiwan under something called Presidential Drawdown Authority. Now, Taiwan buys most of the weapons that it receives from the United States. They are generally not gifted weapons. However, former President Biden had used this authority to send a modest amount of military equipment to Taiwan, and that was as much a political gesture as it was a gesture to improve Taiwan's national defense. It was a modest amount of equipment that was involved. But that's poised for the moment under President Trump's order. But I don't think that really affects Taiwan's national security, because Taiwan wasn't looking for these gifts from the United States to be the cornerstone of Taiwan's defense preparations.
And Ross, do you think the potentially political move before of providing the aid as opposed to it being purchased weapons, do you think that was to sort of fend off China? And do you think Trump's move might entice China into an attack earlier?
I don't think Trump's moves will attack China will cause China to attack earlier. There's still the issue of strategic ambiguity, which is the concept that the United States has not publicly said whether or not it would defend Taiwan should Taiwan be attacked. So there's still that possibility until the United States formally issues a new policy that says the United States would not do that. So even though President Trump has been clear that he does not want the United States fighting wars for other countries, when it comes to Taiwan, President Trump has not said the United States would not do that for Taiwan. So certainly the possibility still exists that the United States would come to Taiwan's assistance, and China has to take that into account when planning its own moves.
Sorry, Ross, just to stick with you for one more off the back of that, what do you think the risk is that this might cause a really deep divide between China and the USA if the USA were to have military action within the region?
Well, certainly China doesn't want to see a more robust U.S. presence in the Western Pacific, including the South China Sea. China doesn't want to see the United States grow a closer military relationship with the Philippines, which is something that there's been a lot of progress in recent years. The United States is also drawing even closer in its military relationship with Japan. It has a large military presence in Korea. So all of these moves are things that China will publicly object to. But I think if we look at what happened in the first Trump administration and then continuing into the Biden administration and now Trump is back, I do think we're going to see enhanced security cooperation and enhanced U.S. presence in this part of the world.
Ross Feingold and Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, thank you both very much for joining us. We stay with Donald Trump, who has adopted a lenient approach towards China since taking office, which has contributed to a significant rise in Chinese stock prices. Here's the report on Trump's perspective on China, his tariff policies and the subsequent economic developments.
I'm also going to ask all NATO...
In an interview with Fox News, President Trump expressed reluctance to impose tariffs on China, stating the US has significant leverage through tariffs, but he prefers not to use them, aiming to avoid further escalation. Trump previously threatened to impose 10% tariffs on China for allowing fentanyl to enter the US and has proposed high levies of up to 60% on Chinese goods, a move economists warned could harm trade. Following Trump's comments, the Chinese yuan strengthened in both onshore and offshore markets, with Chinese stocks also rising, reflecting investor optimism and a sense of stability amid uncertainties. Trump reiterated his positive relationship with Chinese President Jinping, describing him as a friend and emphasizing their mutual ambition, highlighting the potential for constructive dialogue. Investors welcomed Trump's softer approach, with markets showing gains, signaling a potential trade deal could be on the horizon, especially after fears of an escalating trade war were alleviated. Hong Kong stocks soared after Trump's positive remarks on future trade talks. The Hang Seng Index rose 1.9% to 20,066.19, marking a second week of gains with a 1.3% increase over the week. China is a key market for US firms. Nearly 50% view it as a top investment priority, as per the China Business Climate Report released by AmCham. China. Over 50% expect to increase investments by 2025. This trend will be interesting to observe as it impacts US-China relations. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We'll now head to Europe for more of the latest news from that continent. Germany's private sector stabilised in January, ending a 6-month contracting streak. The HCOB German Flash Composite PMI rose to 50.1 from 48 in December, highlighting a 7-month high and moving above the growth contraction divide. This improvement was led by a resilient services sector, with its business's activity index climbing to 52.5. Manufacturing, though still in contraction, saw a slower decline, with the PMI rising to 44.1 despite pressures from international competition and economic uncertainty. Manufacturing confidence reached its highest level in nearly 3 years, indicating optimism for the future. Storm Eowyn battered Ireland and Northern Ireland with record winds, causing widespread disruption. A gust of 182 kilometres an hour, nearly 114 miles per hour in County Galway broke an 80-year-old record. Nearly 1/3 of Ireland's homes and businesses lost power, impacting 715,000 properties, with ESB networks expecting extended outages. The storm also cancelled hundreds of flights, shut down schools and halted public transport across the United Kingdom. A red wind warning was issued across Ireland for the first time since 2017, with coastal flooding risks warned. Climate change's impact on storm frequency remains unclear. A Maltese court granted bail to Jorgen Fenech, a businessman charged with complicity in the 2017 murder of anti-corruption journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. French, arrested since November 2019, denies the charges. 3 men are serving prison sentences for carrying out the murder. The court imposed restrictions on Fenech, including a ban on going near Malta's coast or airport, surrendering his passport and not communicating with prosecution witnesses. His aunt deposited a guarantee with the court. Fenech's pre-trial proceedings have lasted years, but a trial date remains unscheduled. Defence lawyers argued he has satisfied all bail requirements. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko pardoned 15 prisoners, including 8 convicted of extremist activity and 7 for drug crimes ahead of his election. Lukashenko is expected to extend his 31-year rule, with the opposition claiming the election is a sham due to the jailing or exile of his critics. Analysts believe he is using these gestures along with prisoner releases to improve relations with the West amid sanctions and pressure over human rights. Lukashenko denies having political prisoners and claims the people have chosen to keep him in power. France is pushing for a massive pause in new EU regulations and delays in environmental reporting rules amid backlash from EU companies against strict environmental laws. The proposals call for a delay in the Corporate Due Diligence Directive and a 2-year delay on the CSRD Corporate Sustainability Reporting Rules. France seeks to ease regulations and to improve competitiveness against US rivals and to speed up growth. The plan is to be presented at an EU ministers' meeting. France's move follows US pressure under President Trump for less regulation. Germany also supports lightening the burden on companies. That is all we have time for, but we'll continue to bring you more of the latest updates from across the world very soon.